America woke on a cold October morning in 1929 with a silence that felt unnatural, as if the air itself was holding its breath. People said the stock market had collapsed, fortunes were erased, banks ruined, but beneath all the noise, something else stirred. Some swore they felt the ground tremble that day, a slow shifting, like something enormous turning over deep beneath the streets of New York. It wasn't the subway, it wasn't the trains. It felt alive. And as panic spread across the country, the tremor followed with it, like a pulse. Winter came early that year. Red lines grew longer, faces thinner, hope smaller. But the hunger wasn't the worst part. People began to feel watched. A presence moved behind them in alleys, in abandoned buildings, in the silent corners of soup kitchens. No one ever saw it fully, but they felt the breath, slow and heavy, behind their backs. In Chicago, homeless men went missing. In Detroit, children cried at night, saying someone whispered their names from outside the tent walls. People blamed stress, fear, starvation, but the stories kept spreading. They said there was a man, tall, thin, wearing an old dusty coat. No one could remember his face except for one detail: the smile, a wide, cracked, stiff smile, like it was carved into him. He wandered through empty streets, stood near dying farms, watched trains pass by at night. And every time someone saw him, something terrible followed. A family lost everything. Crops died overnight. Someone vanished without a trace. Some called him the misfortune man, others the walking hunger. But many quietly believed he was something older than the Depression itself. Then the storms came. Dust swallowed entire towns in the Great Plains. The sky turned black at noon. People tied ropes to their homes to avoid being lost in their own yards. During the worst storms, some heard voices in the wind crying, laughing, whispering their names. Farmers claimed that inside the dark walls of dust, they sometimes saw the tall man standing motionless, the wind curling around him like he commanded it. A few swore they saw shapes crawling within the storm, moving like twisted shadows, rising and falling under the soil as if the earth itself breathed. America kept sinking. Factories closed, cities emptied, men wandered with no destination. Railroad tracks became rivers of broken souls. Travelers on Route 66 said shadows walked beside their cars even when no one was there. Workers found footprints on top of train cars where no one could have climbed. Children in shantytowns woke up screaming that someone with a long smile stood over their beds. And still, no matter where people went, they felt the presence near them, always just out of sight. People said the Depression ended in 1939. But many who lived through the darkest nights refused to believe it ever truly left. They said something remained, something that fed on despair, walked with the starving, and lingered in every abandoned street. Some nights, old survivors claimed they still saw him in reflections of dark windows, standing far behind them, watching. And if the room was quiet enough, they could hear that same slow, dragging breath they'd felt decades ago, the breath that followed them through hunger and fear. But the story didn't end there. When the war started in Europe, thousands of Americans left their broken towns to fight. Yet wherever these men went, camps, trenches, ships, the same reports appeared. Soldiers swore they saw a thin man in a dusty coat at the edge of their vision. Some said he stood among the wounded, unmoving, watching. Others saw him on the battlefield after the gunfire stopped, his carved smile glowing faintly through smoke. They said he did not belong to America or Europe. He belonged to suffering itself. After the war, America rebuilt. Cities lit up again. Streets filled with life. But in the homes of those who had lived through the Depression, photographs began to show something strange. A shadow behind someone who stood alone. A tall shape in the background of a family picture. A faint, unnatural smile in a window. At first people thought it was coincidence. But then, those same families began losing everything again. Jobs vanished overnight. Homes burned down. Loved ones disappeared. It was as if misfortune had a memory and returned to collect what it believed was owed. Some said that the creature, whatever it was, had been born from the despair of 1929, a spirit created by hunger, fear, and loss. Others said it had always existed, waiting for the moment when a nation fell to its knees. The oldest rumors claimed it was not a man at all, but something that fed on human suffering, and the Great Depression had made it strong, too strong to leave. Even today, in forgotten towns and abandoned houses across the Midwest, people still report seeing a figure standing at the end of their street late at night, Tall, motionless, dusty coat, carved smile, watching, waiting, and every time he appears, a new wave of misfortune follows: accidents, sickness, disappearances. As if history repeats itself not because people forget but because something remembers. And whenever a financial crisis hits, whenever fear spreads through the country, whenever thousands feel hopeless again, old survivors whisper the same warning, that somewhere beneath the ground, something begins to stir, just like it did in 1929. The slow trembling, the pulse beneath the streets, the sign that the hunger is waking again. And when it rises, it walks with a smile. Years passed, and the country tried to bury its darkest memories, but shadows have long memories. In the quiet corners of forgotten towns, old people whispered that despair never truly disappeared. It only waited for the right moment to return. Some nights, when the wind crept through empty streets, families heard footsteps outside their doors, slow and deliberate, as if someone was tracing the outline of their home. Dogs refused to bark, lights flickered, and then the silence followed, heavy, expectant, almost alive. Travelers moving across the Midwest at night claimed they saw a lone figure, standing near abandoned gas stations, his dusty coat unmoving even in strong wind. Drivers who passed him felt the temperature drop instantly, as if they'd driven through a pocket of frozen air. When they looked in the rearview mirror, he was gone, but the feeling of being watched stayed with them for days. In some towns, bad luck began clustering in strange patterns. A family's breadwinner lost his job the next week, their crops failed the week after. Their youngest child went missing for hours, found trembling near an old barn, whispering that a tall man kept calling her name from the shadows. She said his smile never moved, not even when he spoke. People tried to explain it away: stress, coincidence, imagination. But the older generation knew better. They remembered the nights of 1933, when breath froze on their lips and despair filled the air like smoke. They remembered the tremor beneath the ground, the whisper in the wind, the tall figure rising from the dust storms. And now, they felt the same trembling again, faint but real, echoing under the soil like a heartbeat beginning to wake. Some said the creature fed on fear. Others believed it thrived in times of uncertainty, growing stronger the more hopeless people became. A few insisted that whenever misfortune spread across the country, it wasn't economic collapse. It was him, roaming again, collecting what the Depression had once promised him. And as unemployment rose and restless nights returned, the old warning resurfaced, that the man with the carved smile never truly left. He only steps out of the shadows when the world grows weak enough to invite him back.